In today's video, I wanted to go over the tale of the Pale Pass and the Draconian Madstone featured in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. These important topics come from the quest, Lifting the Vale. Both the Madstone and the Pale Pass play an important role in the Akaviri invasion as well as Raymond Cyrodiil. The lore behind them is quite extensive, and it even gets broken down by an NPC in the game. The adventure to get to this lost site is a long and perilous one. Many dangers stand in the player's way, but the relics and treasure make the journey worthwhile. As per usual, the facts and information provided are brought to you by the game itself and the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. In order to begin the quest, Lifting the Vale, the player must have a fame count of at least 10. To get there, you can embark on various other quests around Cyrodiil. For my character, going along with the Mages Guild questline was glorified enough. Fast traveling over to Bruma and lingering around the area, you'll be approached by a messenger.
Good day, I'm Tolgan, herald to Countess Carvain here in Bruma. She requests your company at your earliest convenience. Countess Carvain would prefer if you speak to her in person. She also said to present you with this stipend as a taste of things to come. My lady holds court from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening each day. That would be the best time to see her.
While the present is modest, it's clear from this gesture that the Countess is willing to pay for your services. Now, meeting with Carvain, she's going to explain the quest and the lore behind it. It's a very long explanation, and while I'm sure some of you may find it interesting, others may not. So I'll put a timestamp below indicating where you can skip ahead to. Through the events of the quest, you'll probably pick up what's going on and what needs to be accomplished rather quickly. For those sticking around though, it's time to approach the Countess and see what she'd ask of us.
I've heard much about your deeds from my people in Bruma. I trust the stipend Tolgan gave you whetted your appetite. Good point. Allow me to formally introduce myself. I'm Countess Carvain. I assume you've noticed all the Akaviri relics I'm displaying. Well, it's safe to say I'm a collector of sorts. I've invested a great deal of time and money acquiring these bits of ancient history. In fact, I'd be so bold as to proclaim my collection the most complete in all Cyrodiil, perhaps even beyond. Except for one thing. A particular relic has eluded me for many years. Possessing this piece of Akaviri antiquity would make my collection complete. I'm of course referring to the Draconian Madstone. The stone is a fine bit of Akaviri craftsmanship. Worn like an amulet, this talisman is said to protect the wearer from poisons of any type. The Madstone appears as a snake coiled around and encircling itself. The eyes of the snake are supposed to be precious gems or some such. Through my sources, I've learned that the last reported location of the Madstone was the ruins at Pale Pass. Are you familiar with the history of Pale Pass? Back at the end of the First Era, raiders from the continent of Akavir attempted to gain a foothold here in Tamriel. At that time, the Empire was broken into smaller factions. Raymond Cyrodiil decided to unify them and form an army to repel the Akaviri raiders. The force became known as the Army of Raymond. The two armies clashed in what's now northern Cyrodiil. The Akaviri were strong and well supplied. But their greatest error was marching through Morrowind on the way to their objective and dismissing the response it would garner from Vivec. They didn't count on Lord Vivec forming an alliance with the Trident Kings of the Dreg. From Morrowind he struck at their rear flank. Not only did this make the Akaviri fight on two fronts, it also cut off access to reinforcements and supplies from the sea. Not quite. The army of Raymond knew that the organized Akaviri forces were commanded from a hidden post in the mountains. Rumors placed it in a snowy vale called Pale Pass. That's where Raymond focused his attention. As his forces fought their way across the Gerald Mountains, the Akaviri suddenly surrendered. It was assumed they were overwhelmed and gave up. The only strange part was that the command post and Pale Pass were never found. It was dismissed as a rumor, and the army of Raymond celebrated. It's come to my attention that the post did exist, and it happens to be the last reported location of the Draconian Madstone. If you retrieve the Draconian Madstone for me, I'll be happy to compensate you by rewarding you with another Akaviri artifact. Are you game? I had a feeling you'd accept. Good. Then let me tell you how you're going to find the Madstone. I've come into the possession of a diary, written by an Akaviri messenger. I suspect that the text within can lead you to the ruins. Here's a translation of the passages we could still read. It was quite damaged. I've also included a rough map that was drawn in the diary as well. I'm also providing you with a unique key that was supposedly found with the diary. I'm assuming it'll prove useful when you arrive at the site. I paid several scouts to try and find the ruins at Pale Pass before I hired you. They were only able to locate the first of a series of landmarks. These landmarks are mentioned within the diary. The one referred to as Dragonclaw Rock has been located. I'll mark it on your map. The rest is up to you. My scouts reported bitter cold and dangerous creatures in the area, so they couldn't proceed. Be cautious and return home soon. Good luck.
Like I said before, it's certainly a big lore dump of information. However, with the explanation out of the way, it's time to start looking for the Serpent's Trail in the Pale Pass. The Countess said that very few of her scouts made it past the second clue. While their reason is valid in that the enemies there are quite dangerous, you'll see how easy it is to make it into the Serpent's Trail. Now, Narina handed me a map as well as the messenger's translated document. Using said document and map, it's rather simple to get to the hidden passage. The first entry, which takes place on the third day of the messenger's travels, talks about how the courier has been selected for this special mission. They're coming from a place called Grey Ridge and are on their way to Pale Pass. The message indicates that the next shipment of supplies will be delayed. Without this notification from the courier though, Pale Pass may try to press the attack, even though they have nothing to back up their efforts. As that setup entry ends, the next one is penned in as day 7. It reads, "It has been 2 days and I have finally arrived at Dragonclaw Rock. The huge formation is a welcome and invigorating sight. The giant stone appears to reach down from the north and strike at the heart of Remus's forces like our armies have been doing for the better part of a year now. I have still encountered no one else on this trail. I hope that as I head due west along the narrow path, I will find someone who can give me some news as to how our men are faring in the war." Fortunately, Dragonclaw Rock has already been marked on the player's map. It's a brief distance northeast of the city, and the trek there is fairly safe. The area contains a few leveled enemies, and obviously the lower your level, the easier they'll be. From Dragonclaw Rock, you can read the next entry of the journal, or look at the drawn map and find out what the next move is. Day 8. After winding my way westward, I have come within the sight of the Sentinel, a huge statue placed there by some unknown artist many years ago. It stands watch pointing north, as if daring anyone to cross the borders into the Imperial Nation. Remus would be quite angry if he knew we used this very statue as a waypoint into his domain. Last night, I encountered another one of our messengers who had been beset by a pack of mountain wolves. His leg was hurt badly, but I managed to help heal it with an ample of medicine I carried with me. He said his name was Silage, and he was on his way from Pale Pass to request more supplies. I discussed with him the irony of our meeting, and he decided to travel with me back to the fort since his mission would be needless. We planned to leave at nightfall. Following the instructions and traveling west from the rock, it doesn't take long for the player to reach the statue of the Sentinel, a worn soldier climbing as tall as the nearby trees. Again, following the man-made map will lead you to the next spot. What's more, there seems to be a stone path that leads north. However, consulting the journal, it reads, Day 9. I am using much of my remaining strength writing this. As we had made our way north from the Sentinel, we were attacked by perhaps the same pack of wolves that had attacked Silage. He had chased them off earlier after being bitten, but now that they had tasted blood, they had returned in greater number. Fighting back to back, Silaj and I slew at least 8 of the beasts, but not before one of them clawed my gut and left a terrible wound. We were able to drive them off, but now I am bleeding badly, and the only medicine I had, I gave to Silaj. We have decided to continue north until we reach the portal to the Serpent's Trail and seek cover inside. I will try to write more soon, but I must sleep. I am so very tired. Running along the pathway north, you'll encounter more leveled enemies as well as monsters. However, it doesn't take long for you to stumble onto a nearby cave. The cave in question has a remarkable door as its entrance, one unlike I've ever seen in the province of Cyrodiil. Going on inside the Serpent's Trail, the final journal entry will give you a heads up as to what awaits. This is the last entry I shall be able to write. We entered the Serpent's Trail nearly a day ago, seeking shelter from the elements and the wolves. What we did not foresee was the creatures that had decided to make the Serpent's Trail their home. I did not see them clearly, but they were huge and strong. Silaj died instantly as one of them cleaved off his head with a single stroke. There were 3 of these huge, ugly, man-like creatures. I ran as fast as I dared through the dark tunnels, trying to escape. But as I fled, one of them hurled a boulder at me and struck me square in the back. I managed to crawl through a smaller opening and escape the lumbering monsters. But I soon realized that crawling is all I would be able to do. I think the boulder shattered my spine. I can no longer feel my legs. My wound from the wolf attack has reopened, and I have lost much blood. I fear that this is as far as I shall be able to go. I have failed my mission. I have been unable to get these orders to the fort at Pale Pass. I am so close, yet it may as well be leagues away since I can no longer walk and my strength is draining. If a fellow messenger or soldier picks up this diary, please get the orders to the fort before it is too late. And please tell my wife, Vata, that Javeri will always love her. From this point forward, the trek is uncharted territory. None of the Bruma scouts have made it this far, and Javeri's journal entries come to an end. Beginning the journey, one of the first things you come across is a pile of bones. However, upon getting close, the game points it out as being the skeletal remains of the messenger. Clutched in his bony grip is an Akaviri tablet, the message that was meant for the garrison at Pale Pass. Unfortunately, for now, the only way to interact with it is by putting it into your inventory. It can't be read or used in any way. Again, only for now. As for the monsters that Javeri wrote about, it's time to officially get acquainted with them. The Serpent's Trail contains nuisance creatures, leveled monsters, as well as Pale Pass ogres. These ogres are also leveled. If you're having trouble with them, similar to their kin, they have a 25% weakness to poison. At the end of the trail, you'll exit through a door that leads you into the legendary Pale Pass. The stories and myths ended up being true. Narina mentioned that scholars doubted this area's existence, but alas, here you are. The Pale Pass is essentially a hidden valley within the Gerald Mountains. It's no wonder that the only way to access it is through the Serpent's Trail. The surrounding terrain is dangerous and practically impassable. Following the road, the player will come across more ogres. The trail only had around 4 for the player to face, but the pass itself contains near a dozen. Eventually, towards the end of the line, the player will receive a journal update. You've officially laid eyes on the abandoned Akaviri fort. Heading on inside, another journal update pops up. It makes note that the spirits of the Akaviri soldiers are restless. They still roam the fort's halls and guard its chambers against outsiders. The undead Akaviri soldiers are all 1 level under the player. They fight using ruined katanas and shields. Even though they have a plethora of resistances, they're not very challenging foes. Fort Pale Pass has 5 different zones to it. The first one is the Mouth of the Serpent. There are a handful of side rooms and chambers that the player can explore, but sticking to the main hallway, you'll soon end up in Zone 2, Eyes of the Serpent. The Eye is among the smallest of the zones. There are 2 different pathways to take, and both end up leading you to the third area, Fangs of the Serpent. The Fang is probably the biggest of the zones. However, it's tied with having the least number of enemies. After eliminating some undead and passing over a drawbridge, you'll be led into the 4th area, Venom of the Serpent. This is the smallest zone. It only contains 1 other NPC. The ghost of Akaviri commander Mashazi will be waiting to speak with you at the other side of the room.
You have made a long and perilous journey, but there is no time to rest. The army of Raymond is at our doorstep, and our supplies have dwindled. We have awaited your arrival, Tell us, what news do you bring from Akavir? Well done, soldier. Your mission is complete, and you have my thanks. Now we may rest. Long live the Akavir.
This is probably the most ideal way to handle the situation. The commander fades off into Aetherius, and the rest of the undead soldiers are put down. This makes your escape from the fort effortless. Otherwise, the player can choose another dialogue option and face down Mishazi.
How dare you address me that way, soldier? Your insolence will not be tolerated.
The commander is placed one level above the player and fights using an Akaviri Daikatana. Even though he's a ghost, he's registered as wearing a full set of blades armor. His attacks can be quite powerful, and he has a resistance to normal weapons. While my character here is a rather low level, the fight wasn't all that challenging. I was lucky enough to be able to keep my distance, fire off a flurry of arrows, and take minimal damage. When Mishazi is vanquished once and for all, a false wall opens up at the back of the room. This leads to a small side chamber which holds the invaluable Draconian Madstone. Securing it, it's time to get out of Fort Pale Pass. Using the 5th zone, Scales of the Serpent, it leads the player back to the mouth of the Serpent. Successfully exiting the ruins, the player can now fast travel back to Bruma. However, before leaving, I really quickly wanted to take care of the hidden quest, a Ring of Keys. I already did a video on all of Oblivion's hidden quests, but I figured since I was in the area, might as well take a quick minute to carry it out. Plus, there's a chance that a Ring of Keys might play into some of the Pale Pass's lore. Located in a small bed of ice, just east of the fort itself, you'll come across a frozen barrel. The barrel contains a rusty key, as well as a crumpled note. The note reads, 14th of Heartfire, 3rd Era, year 362. I guess you found the message I told you about, old friend. We've traveled together for so long, and you're the only one I trust with the ring and my story. I knew climbing into the window of that wizard's house was a mistake, but the bounty on the ring was just too enticing to pass up. They said it was worth thousands of drakes, enough to keep me comfortable for a while as I lay low. They also said Ortherzel was out of town at some meeting of wizards or some such. They were wrong on both accounts. You'd think I'd be used to this by now, dealing with the unpredictable in our line of work. But after trying to fence the ring all over Cyrodiil, no one would touch it. Worse still, Ortherzel was pursuing me the entire time. I had to call in many favors to stay one step ahead of him. I decided to strike north and make for Skyrim. As I was crossing the Gerals, he finally caught up to me. 2 fireballs later, I found myself tumbling down a steep snowy slope into a valley. Don't know where I am, but there are ruins of some old fort here. Luckily, that fetcher didn't follow me down. I assume he gave me up for dead. I think I'm going to stash the ring in this valley, make for Skyrim, and return later when I feel it's safe. I've used some old chests I found in the ruins to make sure nobody stumbles across the ring by mistake. You know, the old key to a key thing like we used to do. If I don't make it back here and you're reading this message, then the ring is all yours, my friend. Use it well and remember me. Signed, GS. Unfortunately, the note doesn't leave any clues behind for the player. The next container is located somewhere in Pale Pass, and it's up to you to stumble around and find it. Luckily, the game is now pretty old, and there are several wikis and forums that can tell us where to go. So, the next container, the Rusty Chest, is located in a watchtower just west of the fort itself. Inside of it is an old key. Grabbing it, I made way along the pathway back to the Serpent's Trail. Shortly into the trek, I came across a downed column. Southeast of the column, behind a group of rocks, was the old chest. Inside of that was the Forgotten Key. The final container, the Forgotten Chest, was located southwest of the door to the Serpent's Trail. Inside was the Enchanted Ring, the Circlet of Omnipotence. It fortifies the wearer's endurance, speed, strength, and willpower, all for 3 points each. With that little side quest within a side quest taken care of, it was now time to head back to Bruma. Before giving the Madstone over, I wanted to take a quick look at it. Not only does it have a unique appearance, its enchantment is quite powerful too. 50% resistances to both poisons and diseases.
Have you recovered the Madstone? I never thought it possible. I mean, I had hoped. But to actually hold it in my hands. Oh, it's more beautiful than I imagined it. Congratulations. I had a feeling you were the right person for the job. And it seems I owe you a reward. This Akaviri ring was found with the messenger's diary. It awards the wearer with increased agility and resistance to harmful magic. It's known as the Ring of the Viper Eye. I hope it serves you well in your future journeys.
The Ring of the Viper Eye is a leveled piece of jewelry. In its best possible version, it fortifies agility by 10 points and grants the wearer with a 15% resistance to magic. With that, thus ends the quest, lifting the veil, and now let's talk a little bit about the Pale Pass and the Draconian Madstone. Now, I wanted to start the conversation with the Madstone. The reason being is because there isn't much information on it. We know that it grants the wearer with resistances to both disease and poison. It's a rather uniquely crafted amulet and is likely in the style of most other Akaviri jewelry. Its jewels aligned in the shape of a serpent, the Akaviri insignia. The Draconian Madstone seems to hold a great deal of importance among the warriors at Pale Pass, so much so that the amulet was locked away in a side room, and it was guarded by none other than Commander Mashazi himself. However, the why is unknown. There are no other texts or conversations that discuss the Madstone. How the Countess even found out about it is a mystery. However, I'm assuming that her Akaviri collection goes beyond the display cases in the castle's Great Hall. Really, we can only speculate on the importance of the amulet. One thing is for certain though. Commander Mashazi and his garrison are confirmed as being Seishi, one of the many races found on Akavir. By the way, there's so much discourse online about how to pronounce that word. With no definitive answer, I'm gonna go with Seichi as it's the easiest way to say it. In any case, the Seishi are actually beastfolk, more specifically serpents. Well, sort of. They are humanoids, but accounts vary as to whether or not they're more human or snake-like. Mashazi seem very human-like to me, but Oblivion had its limits, and further claims pose that the Seishi might be shapeshifters. As pointed out by the UESP, this makes it even more difficult to determine their actual forms. In any case, there's no mention of whether or not the Seishi are materialistic, or rather, place their faith into holy objects. They believe in symbolism, worship 4 lesser-known deities, and revere their ancestors. But why they hold the Draconian Madstone on a pedestal, tucked away inside the fortress, is unknown. Maybe it holds significance to the commander, reminding him of his homeland and what he's fighting for. Maybe it was given to the garrison by a leader of the Seichi for good luck and prosperity on their voyage. Perhaps it serves as a way to worship and revere their deities and ancestors. Or maybe Bethesda just wanted to show off the stone in a fancy light. As of right now, 20 some odd years later, the answer is still unknown. Now, let's switch gears to the legendary Pale Pass. Here's a brief recap on its history. The fort was assumed to be built at some point in the First Era. The Imperials used it as an outpost, likely connecting their network between Bruma and Skyrim. Sometime after the year 2703, the invading Akavir were beaten by Raymond's army and the forces of Morrowind. In their retreat, they happened across Fort Pale Pass. Here, they took control of the fortified outpost and made it their base for quite some time. The rest, as we know it, is history. The Akaviri never received a letter from the messenger, Shiveri, and as such, died from a lack of supplies and provisions. Now from here, there's a bit of a time jump in history. The player gains access to Fort Pale Pass in the year 433 of the Third Era. But what happened before then? Well, after the death of Commander Mashazi and his forces, the rest of the Akavir swore fealty to Riemann. From that point onward, well into the Second Era, the pass was used as a passage that went between Cyrodiil's Bruma and Skyrim's Falkreath. However, at some point in the late Second Era, and possibly beginning of the Third, Pale Pass became obscure. The valley in the Gerals was seemingly forgotten. Scholars began to doubt its existence, and the last remnants of the Akaviri garrison were buried. Why is unknown. It's never explicitly stated why the pass's popularity and use dropped within the recent years. Also, why adventurers had never stepped foot inside the fort in search of treasure and fame is beyond me, especially if the pass was still operable. There are 2 reasons though that I could think as to why the pass became a distant memory. Number 1 is shifting terrain. A lot of avalanches have been recorded in the Gerals, and we can even see that the pass is partially buried in snow and rocks. Next is the presence of all the ogres. With a change in terrain came a change in the area's inhabitants. We know that ogres are privy to the Gerals. The shifting terrain probably opened up several new access points for these brutish creatures to enter the valley, and as such, the pass was deemed unsafe for passage. Cue the year 362. The thief GS stumbles into the pass. His assailant, Ortherzel, doesn't dare follow him down. Maybe this is out of common sense. A random valley in the Gerals could be dangerous. Or maybe it's because the pass isn't as forgotten as everyone thinks it is. Ortherzel, potentially a very old wizard, might know the Pale Pass and the dangers it poses to those who enter it. The thief, GS, made mention of traveling through to Skyrim. This implies that the pathway to Falkreath was still open. However, there's no such path available to the player. Again, either an obvious limitation from Oblivion, or a deliberate lore-based choice from the developers. I think it's fair to assume that the ogres were already in the valley come year 362. After all, the presence here goes as far back as the First Era. Now, who's to say if GS even made it out of the Pale Pass? Who's to say that the passage to Skyrim wasn't already blocked off, or that he was killed by ogres before he could make it? After all, ogres are cannibalistic creatures and would have left very little of his corpse behind. However, the UESP suggests that the rediscovery of the pass brought on more provincial travel between Cyrodiil and Skyrim, indicating that the access points in and out of the valley were still intact. Even the Black Horse Courier wrote about the valley, claiming that the Akaviri were wiped out by landslides and avalanches, which, as we learned, is not true. However, fast forward to the events of Skyrim. It seems like the Pale Pass has now officially been lost to time. The snow, ice, and rocks have shifted, and the avalanches have taken their toll. The Imperials can no longer access Skyrim, and the Nords can no longer make their way down to Cyrodiil. This was exceptionally challenging for both sides, especially during Skyrim's Civil War. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Members, I really appreciate your support on this channel. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Until next time, keep on adventuring.